The biggest process I think we've introduced over the last couple of years in terms of customers and customer retention is asking every customer every month how we're doing across 4 or 5 metrics.
From Swoop, it's Take the Plunge, a podcast about how business owners decided to swap what they were doing and took the plunge to start their own business. My name's Kieran and I'll be your host for this episode. Today, I'm very excited to be joined by Dave Endersen, who is partner at White Bear. White Bear creates disruption for startups, scale-ups, and big brands who need to step up and stay relevant. White Bear has offices in London and Dublin and have built up an impressive roster of clients over the years, including Bank of Ireland, Red Bull, Nestle, Deloitte, and M&S. You're very welcome, David. How are you doing today?
Thanks, Kieran. I'm pretty good, all things considered. Yeah, enjoying things opening up in London, so can't complain.
Great stuff. Well, I know yourself and your business partner, Kelly, are behind White Bear, and if I can try and take you back to the very beginning, appreciate Kelly was in at the very, very beginning before you came on board a couple of years ago. But talk me through that kind of journey that you went on in terms of deciding to stop what you were doing and then come and join Kelly full time at White Bear.
Yeah, sure. So Kelly set up the agency about 7 years ago, and I'm obviously Kelly's partner in life as well as business. So I was living vicariously through her as she grew the agency, and I was a director from day one, but I was working in the corporate world at the same time. So I was balancing the two and helping her at night and at weekends and so on with growing her business. And it came to a head maybe 2 and a bit years ago when we were trying to split our time between Dublin and London. The agency was really taking off. Business was ramping up a lot. And we had our first son, and he was probably 2 at that stage. And Kelly had been commuting between Dublin and London, and we just said it's either now or never. We go for it or we don't. And yeah, thankfully I took the plunge and said, yeah, it's now, and quit the day job, which I was sad to leave, but equally excited to join the dream of running our own business together. And we packed our bags and moved back to London. We had been in London for 8 years. We went home for our first child, and we moved back to London then in July 19. So just before, I suppose, by the time we got back and settled, then COVID hit. So yeah, it's been an eventful couple of years since then.
And then I suppose kind of what were the kind of signals that you were getting in those kind of 4.5 years into the business that were showcasing to you, okay, I think there's something here. I think it's worthwhile more investment to potentially scale this up a little bit more. What were you seeing?
I think the first thing is the quality of the work. So the team were doing really, really great work, and they're working with really interesting clients. They're working with sort of challenger brands who really wanted to do something a bit different and disruptive. So the work was really, really good. And secondly, we were winning a lot of business. So there was an opportunity for us to scale. We were saying we're winning a lot of business. Kelly's trying to run it from Dublin and London. She's on a plane every couple of weeks. It just doesn't make sense. The opportunity is there. And I think finally it was my background was more, I'm not a creative at all. And my background is more in operations, finance, consulting. And I had a bit of experience in terms of running teams, not quite running business, but the nuts and bolts behind it. And we saw that as an opportunity for us to split our roles a little bit, free Kelly up a bit more to be the face and the creative lead, and for me to help run the business. So it was probably a combination of all of that.
And obviously you've had a pretty close eye on the business from day dot. In terms of kind of getting operational as an agency, is there much higher barriers to entry, or are there a couple of roles or tactics that you need to have implemented before you can kind of get up and going?
I think in terms of barriers to entry, there's not a huge amount in terms of capital or anything. I mean, you can be creative from anywhere in the world if you have a piece of equipment. I think the big barrier for Kelly was getting out there and getting her name out there, and getting her team's name out there and building a brand, an agency brand. So there was an awful lot on her part of hustle, really. It was just pure entrepreneurial hustle, getting out there and meeting people and convincing people that she was worth working with and the value that she would bring. So she brought a huge amount of grit and hustle to build the business in the first few years, to build clients, to build a track record, to build case studies. Because I suppose there's the proof that you've worked with great brands in an agency before, but can you do it on your own or as part of your own agency? And that's what Kelly really proved over the first few years as part of her journey. So in terms of barriers to entry, probably minimal, but mainly just getting out there and meeting people.
And then I suppose in terms of kind of growing the team out, obviously you talked a little bit about, I suppose, the power of Kelly. She's out there hustling and obviously convincing people of her creative talents. But obviously it gets to a stage where you're winning lots of business, and the type of business that's you require creative, talented people. Was it hard convincing or building the team up? Was there challenges in that space? How did you find that?
I think that the model Kelly followed in the first few years was to hire really talented juniors, and she'd work with them quite closely, and she'd be the lead, and she'd empower them, but she'd ultimately be the lead. What we've tried to do over the last couple of years, particularly since I've come on board, is level up the team in terms of level of seniority, because obviously as we grow and scale and take on bigger work or bigger pieces of work as well, we need people who can lead it themselves. And that's one thing that we've really worked on, is hiring more senior people. So we have a design director working under Kelly now. We have account directors, and we have more middleweights rather than juniors. So we've quite a more senior team. And what that does is obviously it enables Kelly to have more conversations, to have more strategic conversations. So that's probably been the biggest challenge of the last couple of years, is leveling up or bringing the team up to where we need it to be.
And as you've come on board and looked at kind of more the operational side of things, have you kind of introduced kind of new tactics to balance kind of client retention versus going out and winning new businesses? Or is that always kind of a tough dynamic to play out in an agency landscape?
Yeah, we've done a ton of things in terms of, so I suppose your question's around retention versus acquisition. What we've done is, I think, most businesses and certainly agencies recognize that the cost to acquire a new customer is extremely high, labor intensive, can be soul destroying as well when you go through pitching and don't win. And what we really wanted to focus on as a branding agency, where typically brands, you would build a brand over a couple of months and you may say goodbye then and move on and see people, periodically. Really wanted to build longer term relationships. So we've worked really hard on that. We've done more sort of campaign type work, more regular type work with clients. So yeah, it's just building those relationships and making sure that they last longer than the initial couple of months.
And obviously with you guys at White Bear, you're looking at startups, scale ups and established businesses. Are you kind of thinking about it, okay, we should have X number of startups, X number of scale ups, or X number of big businesses? Or is it kind of take what comes through the top of the funnel?
Well, I suppose, it's probably a balance. I think startups can be challenging to work with because typically they're very budget constrained and it's very difficult. So we try and work with a select few startups that we really want to work with and may take a hit on fees or profitability with them, and we balance it with bigger brands who have slightly bigger budgets and can afford to work with us and do some of the partnerships we want to do. So it's a mix, it's a balance really.
And I suppose as you've kind of grown the kind of client book that you have in terms of ongoing relationships, have you brought in kind of tools that enable you to manage those relationships better, kind of reduce administrative tasks? Has there been kind of any kind of game-changing tech that's been pretty useful for you guys?
I think COVID probably forced some of this. It's probably tech and processes, I would say. And I think we were lucky in that the agency had grown up a little bit in terms of Kelly working from Dublin and London. So the team were really used to working remotely even before the world became remote. So there were processes in place that, enabled the team work remotely, talking to clients remotely, all that sort of good stuff. In terms of tech then, when COVID came in, I suppose the usual, Slack, Trello, Productive, lots of tools that we use to keep ourselves honest. But the biggest process I think we've introduced over the last couple of years in terms of customers and customer retention is asking every customer every month how we're doing across 4 or 5 metrics. And we ask them, we get feedback, and then we build a feedback loop into the team. So our account director will interview all the customers, she'll get feedback on where we're at. And anything that we're not where we need to be, anything that's under 8 or 9 or 10, we'll get feedback and verbatim as to why. And we'll feed that back to the relevant people in the team and say, okay, why do we think this is? What can we do to improve it? We then take that to the client and say, look, here's what we're committing to do. And here's what we're committing to do to address your feedback. So I think that's been the biggest game changer, because clients, particularly in a remote world, when you would meet them at discrete intervals like presentation 1, presentation 2, presentation 3, quite often they don't get a chance to voice how they feel or anything that's gone how they mightn't have wanted it to. So we're giving them permission and having those sort of open conversations, and it's been useful for them, and obviously it's been useful for us. So yeah, that's probably the biggest thing we introduced over the last couple of years.
And did you just introduce that to kind of be proactive, or was it reactionary to not getting a read in the client that you thought you had?
No, it was proactive. I think, we recognize that, two things will grow our business. It's doing great work and it's keeping customers happy, because from that you get referrals, and from that people recommend you. So we realize we know we're doing great work, and we want to keep customers happy. How do we do that? We keep talking to them, we get their feedback. And I think different personalities are happy to share feedback in certain times, with different personalities needed in different ways. So we do phone interviews and we do email templates where they can send the feedback virtually rather than face to face or via phone. So we did it proactively. It wasn't in reaction to a particular moment or anything. It was actually wrapped up in a wider piece that we've done over the last couple of years, which is a growth lab that we've done with the team, with a non-exec chairman who's taken us through their methodology to help grow a business. And it's essentially about putting building blocks in place to build your business. So like, what are the key building blocks or foundations of a business that help it scale and grow? So you don't become over-reliant on a founder, you don't have processes, you don't have systems in place. So one of the work streams on the Growth Lab was working on our customer satisfaction, but it's amongst lots of other things, like how do we win new business? How do we market ourselves? How do we do contracts? What systems do we use? All those sort of things we've defined over the last couple of years, and we've involved the whole team in defining it. So it's been a real sort of, we're growing the business together rather than any changes happening to us. So yeah, it's been good.
And Dave, you referenced kind of Ned chairman there. Do you kind of have regular a board set up in terms of how do you engage with them, and how do you decide who you wanted to be on your board?
Yeah, we've just finished with them actually. It was a 2-year engagement, and it was a monthly board meeting where we would do, the leadership team would go through with the chairman our numbers and where we're at and our customer sat and all those sort of metrics, and discuss any issues arising during the month. And then we go through this growth lab that I was talking about, where we bring the wider team in to contribute and present their work. And on a quarterly basis, then we change out work streams. So for example, quarter one might be, I do a work stream on sales, Kelly does a work stream on new product development, someone else does a work stream on contracts. Then you finish that, you embed it into business as usual, and then you move on to quarter two. So by the end of a year or two, you've fundamentally changed your business, because you've changed 10 or 20 different pillars of the business, and the team have been involved in it and defined it themselves. So that was kind of it.
It's great rigor. And in terms of like ensuring that you have, obviously there's good rigor because you're involving all the team and you have a monthly touch point, but were you being proactive in terms of January's new product development, February's sales? So were you forward thinking what the next one was going to be?
Yeah, we planned out the roadmap from the end of the year and work back and say, okay, what are the 12 or 16 things we want to do this year, and in what order? Which is more urgent? Do we want to do marketing before we do contracts? Do we want to do processes before we do customer sat? So we planned it out, and then we divvied it up to the team. And what was nice about it as well was you'd learn outside of your lane. So like, we could have designers learning about contracts, or we could have me learning about design type stuff. So everyone got a chance to understand other areas of the business. And I think that's been really useful, because now going forward, we all understand a little bit better what all of us do, and we're able to pitch in and help where needed.
In terms of actually going back into your lane then for a second, obviously you're heavily involved on managing the financing side of things. And naturally, I imagine with agencies and winning clients, you can have big months, lesser months. How do you kind of manage cash flow from that perspective in a business like yours?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm naturally conservative by nature, so I provide the brakes a little bit for the rest of the team. So yeah, I think, look, there's guidelines around what, your monthly cost base, how many months you need in the bank to always have for a rainy day. So we've always stuck to that. We've always been prudent I use cash flow forecasting. I have my lovely big spreadsheets. I use Float. It's another forecasting tool that
Yeah.
ties into our bookkeeping. And I think it's probably going back to all that. That's kind of after the fact, but we forecast as well our pipeline based on what's in the pipeline and chances of winning and all that sort of stuff. So we have a good idea where we may have some fallow months or some busy months, and we're able to adjust accordingly. But of course, there's not much you can adjust when you're a service business and you're not paying
Yeah.
rent at the moment because of COVID. It's literally all payroll. So my responsibility is making sure we're always okay for that.
And actually, just on that, out of interest, given, as you said, your very guys were well set up for COVID, working remotely, have you decided that you'll go back to an office-based working system, or are you going to continue as you are?
I think we've decided we want to go back, albeit in a hybrid. I think everyone's enjoyed working from home, but they all miss seeing each other. We have a couple of members of the team who've never met each other in
Yeah.
person. So I'm sure lots of people are in the same boat. But I think as well, creative people in particular like spending time together and like brainstorming and spitballing ideas. And whilst we're well set up to deal with that with all the technology we have and Slack and Google and Zoom and all that good stuff, you can't really replace an office or a studio atmosphere. So I think we'll probably in the next couple of months look to go back to some sort of hybrid. But I don't think we nor many businesses will go back to the full 5 days a week sitting at the desk.
No, I think it just from ourselves at Swoop, we experienced the exact same in terms of, yes, lots of great virtual tools, and yes, great benefits from working from home, but you still sometimes need that human to human interaction, and also just the communication flows. You can easily miss out on a one-to-one call, but if there's a few people in an office across teams, you can definitely
I think
pick
so,
up.
yeah. I think it's nice to have the balance as well. I mean, I think in the scenario where you have both, you look forward to both. You look forward to
Yeah,
working from home because you might want to get your head down into something, but you look forward to going in to see people. But I think when it's a 5 day week, and particularly in London, the commute can be
yeah.
horrible. It's not sustainable from any
No.
perspective. So we won't go back to that.
No, 5 days of tube is definitely
Not
well
nice.
avoidable, and
Yeah,
5 days without the Northern Line or the Central Line is also pretty
I
enjoyable.
know. I hear you.
And I suppose just kind of looking back at it all now, obviously you've been more hands-on over the last 2.5 years, as you say, but very much attached to the business since inception. There must have been some pretty big highlights, big wins on along the way for yourself and Kelly. Are there any kind of milestone moments that really stick out for you?
I think personally, it's probably a couple of milestones when Kelly handed in her notice and went and set up her business. I mean, that's always the most bravest move of any entrepreneur, is to just give that up and go and do it yourself. And then I suppose continuing from that, when I did that as well, because that was kind of really taking the plunge, because
Mm,
Kelly's business was always self-sustainable, but equally as a couple we had a corporate income as well, but now we don't anymore. I think just seeing the quality of the team now that we have and have had, we've always been really proud of the team, but just seeing the quality of the team, the people we have, is a really proud moment. We've a really diverse team from experiences from just a huge range of brands, huge size of agencies from small to big. And just seeing that team and seeing them work, I think one thing, Kelly and I always talk about, the really rewarding part of growing a business and building a team, is when you see things happen in your business that you had nothing to do with and they're
mm.
going great. Like someone signs off a new piece of work, or someone delivers a really great presentation, we get really great client feedback, and Kelly or I or anyone else may not have been involved, but you realize, wow, the team are just really taking the lead themselves. I think that's really, really proud moment.
And so, like, I suppose because a lot of people who be listening are maybe considering taking the plunge or have just taken the
Mm,
plunge, and they're probably going through some of the scary moments of shit, I'm out there on my own, or I'm hiring my first couple of people. Have you
mm.
felt that having the experience of going through it over a number of years gives you more of a sense of calm or level headedness?
It does and it doesn't. Yeah, it definitely does. I mean, you have to go through it, and I think any big life experience where there's doubt and there's butterflies or nerves, you just have to go and do it, and it works out. It always works out, I think. And I always just, and Kelly as well, we always talk about the grandfather, the grandmother chair, and looking back and saying, if you were, when you're a grandfather and you're sitting in your chair, will you regret not making that decision? So I think that was one of the key things for us. We're like, we would regret this if we didn't really give it a go a few years ago. But yeah, I think it's just give it a go. It does get easier, but it's it's full on as well. And we've just been through COVID, which wasn't easy for anyone. But equally, building your own business is so much, for me anyway, so much more rewarding than working elsewhere. And I loved working in corporate world as well, but I love building my own business or our own business much more. You can see the impact of things you do. And the more you do them, the more you hustle, the more you try things, you can see the impact on your business, and that's really rewarding.
Amazing. I love the analogy of the grandparent chair and just putting yourself in there and thinking, what would you
Yeah,
want to be saying back? I think, yeah, it's such a lovely way to probably wrap it there. I
great.
just thanks a mil, Dave. You've been amazingly honest, and it's been great to hear about all the experience and so pertinent to anyone who wanted to either start an agency or going through that cycle themselves. So really
Brill.
appreciate
Yeah,
both your time and all the kind of detailed answers that you've given.
pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And obviously, best of luck for everything going forward with White Bear as well.
Thank you. You too. Cheers, Kieran.